Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be focusing on writing a two-part canon, but in this video we're going to write the canon by inversion. So in other words, just to be clear about canon, this is where one voice starts and then a second voice follows on with the same music, but just kind of tracking it a few notes or a few bars or measures behind the first voice. You can of course go on and write this in 3 parts, 4 parts, 5 parts, whatever you want. Just to show the technique, I'm doing it in 2 parts here. Okay, canon. That's how that works. Canon by inversion. So what we're going to do is have one voice using a melodic line and then a second voice copying that, but turning all the intervals upside down. So if one part goes up 3 notes, when it comes in canon, it's going to go down 3 notes. So slightly more complicated than doing a canon where we're all moving in the same direction. But canon by inversion can be a very useful little technique to explore when you're writing something, because it often gives you a kind of sort of contribution, a kind of polarity between the 2 voices that's rather attractive. It's just a little bit more awkward to organise, but you'll soon see how we're going to do this. Now, one thing I always say about writing in canon, if you want to write a canon, one of the things that's going to paralyze writing a canon is to write all of the upper part or all of the lower part and then somehow hope that the other part's going to fit. Well, of course, you can just plot the notes and it's going to sort of work in a melodic sense possibly, but probably the harmony is going to go wrong. You're going to end up writing chords you would never dream of writing normally. You're going to end up with notes that don't belong somewhere, can't really be justified. You're going to have all sorts of problems, assuming you're writing canon in a diatonic style, which of course you don't have to. But let's see how we get on with this one. So 2-part canon by inversion. Now, in this particular example, I'm going to start in the treble clef and have the bass clef following on. And we're in 6/8. Let's make it 1 bar, 1 measure apart. So let's start with an idea in the upper part in 6/8. And we're in F major, so let's start on F. Why not? We don't have to, but why not start on the tonic? And start with a kind of rising 3-note idea. How about that? And then just to sort of mirror that, we'll then have a falling 3-note idea, but sort of with the 3 notes, 1 higher than they originally were. So you see I'm starting with F, G, A, then the next 3 notes are G, A, B flat, but I've turned it around the other way. So I'm already building some of the inversion technique into the writing of the line. You don't have to do that, but it's another way of doing things. So coming up, going up an extra note, then coming down, and just having that little rhythmic modification. So we're not just doing equal notes for 6 notes of a bar or a measure. Okay, and then that's probably going to center itself back here. So we've got a starting point that's very conjunct, just climbing up from the tonic to the 4th degree of the scale, coming back, and then kind of centering in the middle. So it's got an idea that's got its own simple shape. Okay, now before we get carried away writing that upper part, which is the great temptation, oh, I've got something going here, let's carry on. Don't do that. What we're going to do, if the left hand's going to follow on a bar or a measure later, well, we need to put a rest in that first bar, obviously. And then the left hand is going to come in. Now it's going to start on the same note. So I'm going to use that F that I started on the first note of the right hand or the treble clef part. Then I'm going to write what we've written in the upper part, but going in the lower part by inversion. So you see what I'm doing? We originally had 3 notes climbing up. Now we've got 3 notes climbing down. Then we get to this note. We're going to use the same dotted rhythm. And last time we were going down, this time we're going up. So you see how I'm just inverting all the intervals. Last time it went up a note, so this time it's coming down a note. Okay, that's got us started. So you get the idea of how to do this canon by inversion. So far we've got this. Okay, now I've got that far, I'm going to go back to the upper part and write something that fits with what we've got in the lower part, and then perhaps enables us to go on. So I've got this long note in the upper part at the beginning of that second measure. The left hand is quite active, so maybe I can just have another long note there. So that's all I'm doing there, you see. Then I need to write something next that fits with this D in the left hand. So if I were to go for a B flat, well, that will fit because it's a 6 above the D and it's implying a chord 4 in first inversion. Well, I'm now going to go on. I want to maybe use some of the same ideas, but I also want to begin to vary things a little bit. So how about we kind of use that dotted rhythm? Last time we used it in the second half of the measure, so we'll use it in the first half this time. That kind of gives us cohesion because we're using the same idea, but we're using it in a different position inside the bar or the measure. Then, you know, let's carry on reversing the rhythm. So now I'm going to write 3 quavers, 3/8 notes, and it's probably time to have a bit of disjunct movement because everything so far has been conjunct. So let's have a little bit of movement there. And then, you know, where are we going to go from that point? Well, maybe do something like this, conjunct again, and then a disjunct longer note to sort of finish that statement. Okay, so how's it looking so far? Okay, now then, let's see if we can get this to work by inversion. It should do, I've been thinking it through. Back in the second measure in the upper part, we went up a third. So we've got to go down a third. And I've been thinking this through to make sure that it actually fits with what I've just done upstairs. And you'll find that it kind of does. We'll talk about how it does in a moment. So we've got to invert what was happening in the bar before, the measure before. So that's the dotted thing. And then we've got a repeated note. Before we came down in thirds, so we've got to go up in thirds. So that's how this is going to work out now. And then we've got this move next door. So this is now going to play out like this. So I'm hoping you can see what's happening. Before we went up a fifth, now we're going down a fifth. Okay, so halfway through already. This is what we've got. Okay, so, you know, we've got to make sure that's all still working happily. Let's just check out where we are. Well, harmonically, we were doing something fairly straightforward, weren't we? That is really just a chord 1, and then we've got these passing notes going down there, passing tones, onto chord 5. This is effectively a passing note, a passing tone, taking us on to 5 in first inversion. Then we've got 4 in first inversion, passing note, passing tone. This is a harmony note. Then we've got 2 in first inversion. All those are harmony notes. And then we've got this 4/3 appoggiatura onto a chord 5. And then this is going to a 1 in first inversion. And then we've got this A minor chord, slightly unusual, chord 3. But that's all spinning out notes of chord 3. So you see how the harmonic language has got to work if you're in a diatonic style, you've got to be able to justify every note as a harmony note or as a chord tone, or as one of these inessential notes. So, okay, everything is playing out quite happily. Now it's time to carry on with the upper part, writing something that fits with the next measure of the lower part, using some of the same ideas we've had before, maybe beginning to develop in some kind of way, always being cognizant of what's going to happen next when this plays out by inversion in the lower part. So, because we've got 3 straight quavers or eighth notes there, I think this is quite a good moment at which to use the dotted rhythm upstairs. So we're keeping a little bit of independence between the parts, and just running that in thirds is going to work perfectly well. This is all kind of possibly a B flat major chord being suggested by the left hand note, or a G minor chord first inversion. Well, let's kind of go with the G minor idea, and I'm going to use harmony notes, and I'm going to have much stronger disjunct movement now because we've used plenty of conjunct movement. But having done 3 leaps like that, or harmony notes or chord tones, I'm then going to come back by step and also just energize the rhythm a little bit at this point in the piece. So if we do that, that will work quite nicely. And of course that E at the end that I've just written at the end of that bar, that measure, isn't part of the chord 2. So it's got to be a passing note, a passing tone, or an auxiliary note, a neighbor tone. Let's make it passing, so it just kind of goes on to F like that, and then we can kind of see where it goes from there. Okay, now then, we can map this into the left hand now. So I'm starting from the previous measure, obviously, mapping this down here by inversion. So there's the dotted rhythm. We went up a note and came back. So this time we're going down a note and coming back. So that then does this. And then we've got to go up a note, and then we're going to have this disjunct leapy stuff, all by inversion. And then we went up before, so we're coming down now, using these semiquavers or 16th notes, if you prefer to call them that, at the end of that measure. And then that's going to take us on to this note. Okay, well, how's that sounding from the beginning of the second line? So this is bar 5, measure 5. So you see the harmony there. This is chord 1. And upper neighbor tone or upper auxiliary notes in both parts, back to the chord 1. Here's the chord 2 in first inversion, harmony, harmony, harmony. So I've managed to get some disjunct, very distinctive disjunct writing in at that point, but using notes of the chord, passing back to harmony, and this is now looking like a chord 6. Okay, now then, we've now got to put something in the right hand that fits the left hand of this bar, this measure. And maybe, you know, we've just started to get busy. So let's carry on being a little bit busy for a moment. It's a good point in the piece at which just to energize the rhythm a little bit. What do we think about doing something like this? And then that will fit with that. Then we've got a sort of A minor situation being outlined in the left hand. So if I go for a C, that will fit with that quite happily, won't it? Okay, so we can see on that second line now we've got this. So that all plays out. You see how this canon by inversion is working really nicely. Okay, now that second bar, that second measure of line 2 now needs to play out by inversion in the bass in the third bar, the third measure. So we'll just turn all these intervals upside down, obviously keeping all the rhythm the same. And you see how by thinking about the rhythm a bit, you get this sort of conversation going nicely between the parts. Now then, it's interesting what sometimes happens to your intervals. I'm just seeing where we are here, because we had a rising fourth in the previous bar, the end of the right hand. Now we've got a falling fourth. It's worked out that it's a tritone, so we're going to have to be a little bit careful as to how we kind of finish that off, aren't we? But that's all right. Now then, we're about to kind of come to the end of the bit we're writing. So because the left hand is running a bar, a measure behind the right hand, well, we can't carry on in strict canon for very much longer. We're going to have to sort of finish the job off, aren't we? Well, maybe we could do something like this would run in thirds. I think that will work quite well, actually, if we do something like this. Running in thirds or sixths is often a good thing to do. It's always, you've still got to check out what the harmony is. And then possibly, because of this tritone in the left hand, that B flat needs to resolve downwards. And if this is our sort of finishing point for now, well, we could use those two notes that copy the right hand, then maybe just finish off by going down to a tonic there. In fact, I'm going to put that in a different colour, just to show that that is not strictly a note that belongs to the canon. Then the other part, well, by the same token, really, after the first two notes, that we're going to be running a bit independently. So from here, we're just really writing something to finish off the piece, if this makes sense. So all the stuff in black is strictly canonic, and then we're sort of just freewheeling to get to the end of this cadence. So you just got to write something that fits now. And then, okay, well, let's do something like that. We could do something more intricate if we had time to think about it, but it will do for now, won't it? Okay, so thinking through, you know, what all this is about then, we've sort of talked through most of the harmony. I mean, here, this is all implying a sixth. That's an upper auxiliary note or an upper neighbour tone. This is a lower neighbour tone or a lower auxiliary, isn't it? Or, well, or double, because both hands are doing that. And then, you know, we've got this sort of suggestion of maybe a 5 in first inversion, going to maybe, that's either suggesting a 1 in first inversion or it's suggesting a 3. So it could be either, really. Then this is suggesting 1. These are lower auxiliary, then it's harmony. These are upper auxiliary, upper neighbour tones, then it's harmony. And then we've got this 5 that turns out to be a 5/7 in its last inversion by the time we get that in there. And then going on to a 1 in first inversion, finishing on 1. So you see the harmony all works out. You can justify every note of it. And you can see how we've taken this idea and then placed it in inversion all the way through. So it's slightly more tricky to write a canon by inversion, but perfectly possible to do it. And if you do it in kind of snippets like this, you can sort of think through, okay, how's this going to work when it's going upside down in the other part? What's that going to imply for harmony? What's going to fit with that? What's then going to ignite the next measure in a successful way? So you've got to keep thinking ahead all the time. But it sounds like this. See what you think. So there we are, a canon in 2 parts by inversion. So you might have started off thinking, well, it's probably tricky enough writing in canon, but how on earth do you do canon by inversion? Well, hopefully this is just kind of showing you how you can sort of go about doing that. If it's not quite as fluent as that for you in the first instance, don't be kind of disheartened by that. It just takes a bit of time to be able to think on your feet about what the implications are. And you may find yourselves kind of tweaking things, reorganizing things a bit. But at least if you do it one measure, one bar at a time, even if something doesn't work out, you can adjust it without it affecting the whole of the rest of the piece. So there we are, writing a canon in 2 parts by inversion. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me point you to our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. And if you go to the homepage, you'll see all sorts of things that we have on offer. There are lots of courses out there that you might be interested in. You might also be interested in our Maestros program, so have a look at that. There are 3 levels of engagement. It's nothing to do with ability. Anybody of any musical background is welcome at any of those 3 levels. But level 1 is a kind of support level. It comes with perks, emojis, early access to videos, all this kind of stuff. Level 2 adds on to everything that's there on level 1, and you get extra perks, including access to a monthly live stream where I inject an hour of solid teaching. There's a live chat going, so you can ask your questions, make comments, you can request topics that we're going to address. So lots of people are finding that a really helpful resource and just loving sharing that time with other people from all over the world, realizing other people are in the same boat as they are. Then there's level 3. If you want to proceed to that, you have all the level 1 and 2 benefits. But with level 3, discounts on our courses, that's one of the extra perks there. Also access to a second live stream every month, much more individually tailored. You can hand in your own composition, your own piece of harmony, your own Canon by Inversion, your own recorded performance, and I'll give you one-to-one feedback, evaluation on what you're doing, all done in the most positive way possible. We share this in the group, so we all learn from each other, and people who've joined that group have just found it absolutely fantastic. They've enjoyed the camaraderie, and they've also just keep telling me that they're learning so much from the feedback from their own work, but also just kind of witnessing the feedback with other people's work. And it's been amazing to see how musicians have grown, having been members of that group for a while. Anyway, it's all there. www.mmcourses.co.uk.